everybody in the group would have their own idea of how StarCastle started, because everybody had their history in music. None of us in the group were coming to StarCastle as our first band. We'd all had been in other bands. We'd all played with other people before. So there's a lot of history there that went into it. But for me, I went to the University of Illinois intentionally in order to get into a band, because there were a lot of musicians at the University of Illinois, in addition to doing my schoolwork. And I put up a lot of signs around the campus, and I got linked up with a guy named Kevin Kelly. He and I started a group called St. James, and then Kevin had a friend, his name was Mike Castleberry, and the three of us formed a three-piece band called St. James, and then over time we started adding additional members to the group. And one of the people that we added to the group was a guy named Herb Schilt, and he was a keyboard player that was really just starting to learn how to play keyboards at that time. And so we recognized that he was still learning, but we wanted to have an organ in the group. And then there was a break, and Herb went home one summer, and when he came back from that summer break, he was absolutely amazing. I couldn't believe how incredible he had gotten in the space of, a 3-month summer break. And it just showed how talented this guy was. And then over time, Kevin Kelly ended up leaving the group, and we got a bass player named Paul Tassler, who over time became our personal manager. He eventually dropped out of the group and became our manager. And Paul at one point suggested that we get his brother to play drums for us. So Mike Castleberry graduated from school, ended up leaving the group, and Steve Tassler joined the group as our drummer. And then Herb and I had a conversation at one point about StarCastle, one of the early versions of the group, and the idea was, if we don't turn this into something better than what it is, we probably ought to just, give up and go into other things. And so then we talked about, well, why don't we create a group that is really better than any of the other groups that are playing here in Champaign, different from the typical just straight-ahead rock and roll bands. So we decided to do that, and we revamped the lineup. At that point, we added Steve Tassler on drums. We also interviewed, seems like about 100 people, as I recall. And out of that process, we got 3 people that joined the group, but a couple didn't work out. So we ended up adding Gary Strader on bass. And then StarCastle actually played as a 4-member group. We were probably called something else at that time, but it was Herb, Gary Strader, Steve Tassler, and myself. And then Gary and some other folks in the band knew Matt Stewart and Terry Luttrell. They were playing in a group called Sea Daddy at the time, and we ended up getting them to join the group, and so that put together the 6-man lineup that became that original StarCastle. So that's kind of my recollection of how the band formed. And then, at that point we started writing music together, and Lady of the Lake was written very early on in that process, and many of the songs that were put on our first record were done when we were just a skeletal group getting started in those days.